I'd like to take a few moments of historical reconnaissance to look at some events that took place in the early period of church history. Specifically, one of the most poignant moments in the early church that took place in Asia Minor at Smyrna in the year 155 AD. On that occasion, the bishop of Smyrna, who had been appointed according to tradition by a man that he met when he was a young man himself living in Ephesus, a man who tutored him, taught him, and later appointed him as bishop of Smyrna, the Apostle John. I'm referring now to that disciple of John who was a disciple of Jesus, who was the bishop of Smyrna, the venerable saintly Polycarp. In the year 155, during the reign of the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, the bishop of Smyrna, Polycarp, was arrested in his hometown and was brought before the proconsul Quadratus, representing the emperor. And he was facing prosecution for the charge of being a Christian and stirring up people to Christianity, and therefore against, in the vision of the empire, the religion of Rome, and particularly the religion of the cult of the emperor. And Polycarp waited patiently at his home for his impending arrest, knowing that it was about to take place. And he had a vision of himself in flames. And he testified that he heard a word from heaven, saying unto him, Polycarp, play the man. Some of you who are students of church history can fast forward to the 16th century, to a spot on the street in Oxford, England, where two Reformed bishops, Latimer and Ridley, were arrested and were to be executed by being burned at the stake there in Oxford. And as they were tied to the tree, and the brackets of wood were placed at their feet, before the torch ignited that wood, Bishop Latimer turned to his colleague and said the famous words, "Play the man, Mr. Ridley." The same words, of course, that Polycarp had heard in the 2nd century. Play the man, Mr. Ridley, and by the grace of God, this flame will light a candle that will bring light to the whole of England that can never be extinguished. And what followed immediately was the burning of the stake of these two men. Now, go back to where we were, to Smyrna, when Polycarp was placed under arrest and brought by his captives to his hearing before the proconsul Quadratus, and then taken to the arena therein, where the stands were packed with a hostile crowd against Polycarp, including local Jews who resented Polycarp's teaching of Christianity, as well as pagans who hated him for the same cause. Now, the proconsul, on the one hand, did not want to make this elderly man a martyr, making him more beloved by the people, but also he didn't feel exactly right in executing a man so old. Now, we don't know how old Polycarp was, We know that he was at least 86. Some people say that was exactly his age, but his response to the proconsul would indicate that he was even older than 86 years old. So he was told by the representative of the emperor to deny Christ, to recant his Christianity. And Polycarp politely refused, at which point Quadratus said, "You don't understand. I have wild beasts here to which I can feed you if you don't change your tune." This, by the way, was after Rome had banished the execution by feeding people to the lions. Now they were more civilized by burning them at the stake. But without that threat, and by Quadratus, and Polycarp refused to acquiesce, he said, "Okay, then I will burn you at the stake with fire." And Polycarp responded by saying, "Be that as it may, your fire will last no more than an hour and will then be quenched. But the fires that you face right now, under God's judgment, will never go out." Well, Quadratus didn't like that, and he said, "Again, you can spare yourself if you will just do this. If you will say, with respect to the Christians, away with the atheists." Because Christians were considered atheists inasmuch as they didn't believe in the religion of the empire. And so Polycarp said, "I'm happy to comply," and he pointed to the pagans in the stand, and he said, "Away with the atheists," pointing to them. Well, this really infuriated Quadratus, so he ordered the execution of Polycarp by having him burned at the stake. And so they took him to the center of the arena, and they came out with nails to drive his hands to the stake to keep him from fleeing from the fire. And he said, "You don't need nails. I will stand here and take what comes." So instead of nails, they bound him with ropes and tied him to the stake and set the fire going. Now, the witness of history, the testimony is that when they ignited the fire at the stake, the flames were blown by a strong wind in such a way as they swelled up around Polycarp, but didn't touch him, didn't burn or singe even a hair on his head. And so out of frustration, the executioner took a dagger and plunged it into the chest of Polycarp and killed him. And again, the tradition says that so much blood came from his chest that it quenched the fire at his feet. Now, as remarkable as that event was, it could have been easily avoided. When Polycarp was arrested, as he was being taken to his hearing before Quadratus, he was told, "All you have to do to escape all of this is say 2 words. And if you will say those 2 words, your life, your ministry, and all that you mean will survive." I wonder how many of you know what those 2 words he needed to say to save his life. All he had to say was Kaiser Kyrios. Kaiser Kyrios. Caesar is Lord. But Polycarp would choke to death before his lips could utter those words. And when he stood before Quadratus, and Quadratus asked him to deny Christ, he said, look, for 86 years I have served Christ. And in all of those 86 years, he has never forsaken me. So how can I forsake him?